Hey, how's it going, folks? This is some background reading for the Master and Margarita, which is a read-along I'm going to be doing on my Substack and on my YouTube channel in January and February 2026. How about that? I got the year right. I've already posted my background post on Substack, and I meant to record this as a voiceover, but I thought, well, actually I didn't think. I messed up and didn't remember to do this bit, and I'm quite new to posting this as a podcast on Substack. There's a lot of tech involved, so I thought maybe if I do it after the fact it might work out a bit better, and I thought since I'm recording it anyway, I might as well put it out on my YouTube channel, because I know that there are people who don't follow Substack and do follow me on YouTube, so it makes sense just to reach out to everybody, right? Does that make sense? I hope so. So, yeah, the post is up on Substack. I'll put a link to it down below so you can go and read it, and it will also contain links to the announcement post, which went out last week, along with an announcement video, and the schedule and some translation comparisons, where I've covered the first few paragraphs in 4 different translations into English, so you can see which one you feel is the one that vibes with you the most. I won't reiterate any more about that, because you can read the post about that. So this is what I've written. Right, the title is Background Reading for the Master and Margarita. Subtitle, A Short Biography of Bulgakov and a Brief History of the Period to Prepare for the Novel in January. This will be my 4th time reading this novel, and I'm beyond excited to be doing it with the group. As I said in the announcement post that went out to all my subscribers, it's a novel that's special to me because it makes me think of my late mum. I was reading it in the middle of the night after having woken up with a premonition. I was lying on the sofa, fully dressed with my book, when the hospital called with the bad news. So here's a wee extra bit for the podcast listeners and YouTube viewers. I don't remember the time, middle of the night, and I woke up just feeling that something had happened. And I looked into the corner of the room, and I could see a shimmering. Now, I don't know if it was just laundry or if this was real or what, but I could see a shimmering in the corner of the room. And I do wake up quite a lot in the middle of the night, but I almost never get up and come through to the living room. I definitely never get dressed, and I did on that night. Normally what I do is I just read, or the other night I watched a video, Amazon Prime on my phone. Anyway, this night I came through to the living room, lay down just over there on the sofa, fully dressed, with this edition, the Millennium Library from Everyman's Library. And yeah, the phone call came to say my mum had died. So in here I've got a little note with a receipt from the funeral directors. I've got a photo of me and my daughter. That's Freya. So I know that you won't be able to see this on the audio, so apologies for that. A photo of me and my son, Hamish. And a drawing that I did as a Wayne. This is a very common ornament that people had in their homes in the 80s, a horse and cart. That was in my grand's house. And this is the one I should really have showed you first. It's a picture of my mum in her wheelchair with Trixie, the Yorkshire Terrier. So anyway, that's just a wee extra bit for you listeners. Right, what else have we got? I thought you would find some background reading useful before picking up the novel. I read The White Guard, another of Bulgakov's novels, in a reading group here in October, and I know some of you read it with me. I learned a lot about the author during that reading, and it'll stand me in good stead for this reading of The Master and Margarita. Who was Mikhail Bulgakov? And there's a picture there, a famous picture of him with a fag in his mouth, and it says colour by Klimbim, and it looks incredible, the colour I had never seen that picture colorised before. Mikhail Afanasyevich Bulgakov, 1891 to 1940, is one of the most compelling figures of 20th century Russian literature. Although The Master and Margarita is now widely recognised as a modern classic, Bulgakov didn't live to see it published. The novel's long and troubled history is set against the backdrop of Stalinist Moscow and the attendant pressures placed on writers during his lifetime. Bulgakov was born in Kiev, then part of the Russian Empire, into a cultured and educated family. He trained as a doctor and worked briefly in provincial hospitals during the First World War and the Civil War that followed the Russian Revolution. Note, see The White Guard for details of how that went down. These experiences exposed him to human suffering, institutional chaos and moral ambiguity, all of which later reappeared in his fiction in satirical and fantastical forms. In the early 1920s, Bulgakov abandoned medicine and moved to Moscow to become a writer. At first, the post-revolutionary literary scene was lively and experimental, and Bulgakov enjoyed early success with prose and plays that combined comedy, grotesque exaggeration and social critique. As Joseph Stalin consolidated power, however, the cultural atmosphere changed dramatically. Stalinist Moscow and censorship. By the late 1920s and early 1930s, Soviet literature had been brought firmly under state control. Independent literary groups were abolished and replaced by official organisations, such as the Union of Soviet Writers. Socialist realism was declared the mandatory artistic method, requiring works to depict Soviet life as heroic, optimistic and ideologically sound. Satire, fantasy, religious themes and moral ambiguity were increasingly condemned as suspect. Censorship operated in unpredictable and often arbitrary ways. Manuscripts were blocked before publication, plays were rehearsed and then suddenly banned, and writers were publicly criticised in ways that could destroy careers overnight. Bulgakov found himself particularly vulnerable. By the end of the 1920s, almost all of his work had been suppressed. Unlike many writers of his generation, Bulgakov was neither arrested nor exiled. Instead, he endured enforced silence. Unable to publish and increasingly dependent on minor theatrical work, he continued to write privately, revising and rewriting what would become The Master and Margarita. The novel took shape over more than a decade, shaped by a fierce commitment to artistic freedom. Moscow itself, the novel's primary setting, was a city of contradiction. Grand ideological claims coexisted with fear, shortages, bureaucratic absurdity and constant uncertainty. Housing was scarce, denunciations were common, and truth was often whatever authority declared it to be. Bulgakov's Moscow is fantastical and exaggerated, yet rooted in reality. Publication and legacy. Bulgakov died in 1940, ill, exhausted, and largely unknown to the reading public. The Master and Margarita appeared more than 25 years later in a heavily censored Soviet edition. Only gradually did fuller versions circulate, revealing the novel's extraordinary range and ambition. Today the novel is read as both a work of wild imagination and a quiet act of defiance. Written without any expectation of publication, it insists on moral seriousness in a world structured around fear and compromise. Its famous claim that manuscripts don't burn stands as both satire and a challenge. Reading The Master and Margarita for the first time. If this is your first encounter with The Master and Margarita, it may help to release some expectations about how novels usually behave. The book opens abruptly, shifts tone without warning, and moves between satire, fantasy and philosophical seriousness with remarkable speed. Early confusion is not a failure of attention, but part of the experience Bulgakov is creating. Characters appear quickly, sometimes with little explanation, and the narrative leaps between different settings and even different centuries. Rather than trying to fix everything in place immediately, it's often more rewarding to read attentively but lightly, allowing scenes to register before worrying about how they connect. Humour is central to the novel, though it is rarely gentle. Bulgakov's comedy is sharp, absurd and frequently cruel, aimed at vanity, cowardice, greed and self-deception. Moments of farce often coexist with genuine menace, and laughter can turn suddenly into moral seriousness. Religion and philosophy appear throughout the book, but they are presented through story rather than argument. No specialised knowledge of theology, Soviet history or Russian literature is required. What matters most is attention to questions of truth, responsibility and the consequences of refusing to speak honestly. Above all, the Master and Margarita rewards patience. Some of its moving moments arrive quietly and late. Reading the novel in a group allows its layers to surface collectively. Confusion, disagreement and sudden flashes of recognition are not obstacles here, but signs that the book is doing its work. So that's the gist of the post. The rest of it is housekeeping, getting to know each other. So I've started a chat thread on Substack where you can... it's a feature of Substack I've never really used, and I've seen other authors use it well, so I wanted to get to know that feature as well and see if we can spark some discussion in there. It's a weird platform because you get chat threads and you get comments on posts, and I'm never quite sure where discussion's supposed to happen, if it's either one or the other or whether it can be both. I don't know, but you can let me know what you think. I'll try the chat threads, as I said. There'll be a link in the post, so you can go and check that out and let me know whether this is your first time with the novel, or if it's an old favourite and you've read it many times, or if it's somewhere in between. And I'd love to know where you're coming in from as well, because that's something I always enjoy. Being online means that you can tune into this from anywhere in the world. And here I am sitting on a Scottish island, reading these amazing books and chatting to people from all around the world. So yeah, let me know where you're coming in from. That would be awesome. That's it, I think. Yeah, the schedule, we're starting on the 1st of January and we're reading through to the end of February. It's my intention to host a Zoom call for discussion at the end of the novel. If you want an extra one, we could do that maybe at the halfway point. Just let me know if that's of interest to you. That feature will be for paid subscribers only, so if you want to get in on that, then you can go for it. That would be much appreciated. And I'm hoping that by putting out weekly essays and videos and podcasts, that it will help you and help me to get to know this novel even more. As I say, this is my 4th read, so it's not my first day, but there's always more to learn. And I find that as one gets older, one gets different things from the books that one thinks one knows well. Do you find that as well? Having just read War and Peace again, the last time being when I was a student and I was, 24, 25, something like that. Yeah, it was a very different novel, so that was exciting. Which reminds me, it was supposed to arrive in the post today because I wanted to give it to a friend of mine tonight as a Christmas gift, and it hasn't arrived because, as I've just said, living on a Scottish island, it means that sometimes we just don't get mail deliveries because the ferries are cancelled or whatever. So although it's only 4:30, it could still come. So yeah, let me know where you're calling from, and if it's your first time, your umpteenth time, or somewhere in between. And yeah, I'll leave it there, and I'll say thank you for watching / listening, and I'll catch you in January, if not before. See you later.